When I joined Today Show, Weekend Today Show, that was my hardest job because for you guys, you're covering 15 different stories in 10 minutes. You're going from here to here. I can't do that.
For years, Stephanie Ruhle has been known as a fearless voice on television. Sharp, confident, and always in control. But behind the calm smile and powerful presence, she was quietly fighting a battle no one could see. Now, at 50, Stephanie is finally opening up about an illness diagnosis that changed how she sees her body, her career, and her life itself. In this video, we look beyond the headlines to understand what she went through, why she kept it private for so long, and how this deeply personal struggle reshaped her strength in ways viewers never imagined. Stephanie was born on December 24, 1975, to Frank and Louise Ruhle, arriving in the world on a day already heavy with expectation and reflection. She was raised in the quiet, close-knit town of Park Ridge, New Jersey, where her early years were shaped by routine, community, and a growing curiosity about the wider world. At Park Ridge High School, she appeared much like any other determined student, though even then, she was quietly learning how to navigate systems that didn't always fit her way of thinking. That restlessness followed her to Lehigh University, where she earned a degree in international business in 1997. While still a student, she secured an internship with Merrill Lynch, her first real glimpse into the world of high finance. But it wasn't just Wall Street that left its mark. During those years, she was given the rare opportunity to travel abroad, spending time in places like Italy, Guatemala, and Kenya. Those experiences broadened her perspective far beyond textbooks, planting an early understanding that success could look very different depending on where you stood. 2 decades later, when she returned to Lehigh in 2017 as the commencement speaker, her message carried the weight of lived experience. She urged graduates not to let the world dictate how success should be measured, reminding them that while education matters, fulfillment, and the courage to define it for yourself matters even more. Stephanie's path to television journalism was anything but direct, and that winding road is what gives her story its weight. Long before she ever sat behind a news desk, she spent 14 demanding years inside the unforgiving world of high finance. In 1997, she joined Credit Suisse First Boston, where she worked in hedge fund sales and quickly proved she was more than capable of surviving in a space dominated by pressure, competition, and risk. Over 6 intense years, she rose to become the highest-producing credit derivatives salesperson in the entire United States, a staggering achievement that came at the cost of long hours and relentless expectations. In 2003, she carried that momentum to Deutsche Bank, staying there for 8 pivotal years. But Stephanie didn't just climb the ladder quietly. She saw how few women made it into leadership, and decided to change the culture from within, founding the Global Markets Women's Network to help open doors that had long been closed. By the time she left the firm, she had reached the executive level herself, walking away as a managing director, proof that her influence was both structural and personal. Yet despite all that success, something was missing. In 2011, she made the rare and risky leap from finance into media, joining Bloomberg Television. She co-hosted Inside Track, then moved into longer, deeper conversations on market makers and later Bloomberg Go, interviewing powerful political figures, athletes, and media titans. Her instincts as a reporter sharpened quickly, and her defining moment came in 2012 when she and 2 colleagues broke the story identifying Bruno Ixel as the trader behind J.P. Morgan Chase's massive trading loss. The scoop echoed across Wall Street and firmly established her credibility as a journalist. Ultimately, Stephanie became best known to the public as the steady, reflective voice behind MSNBC's The 11th Hour. On January 27, 2022, she stepped into the role following Brian Williams' departure, carrying with her decades of experience, hard-earned insight, and the quiet understanding of how power, ambition, and consequence truly intersect. Stephanie's most personal struggle wasn't something viewers ever saw on camera, and for much of her life she didn't fully see it either. She lives with dyslexia, a learning difference that affects how the brain connects letters, sounds, and meaning. But as a child, her condition was hidden behind what looked like brilliance. With a remarkable memory, she could recite poems and short stories at just 3 or 4 years old. Adults mistook recall for comprehension, and she was pushed ahead, placed in school early, and praised as a gifted reader. Then the illusion began to crack. As the stories grew more complex and understanding mattered more than memorization, she quietly fell behind. She later reflected that this was the moment she started hustling her way through school, finding workarounds, negotiating with teachers, asking for presentations or extra credit instead of written assignments because the pages simply wouldn't cooperate. Outwardly, she adapted. Inwardly, she absorbed a lingering belief that she just wasn't built for classrooms. She would later say she realized early on, "I don't love pages, I love people." Even then, she was already leaning toward the world beyond textbooks. That feeling followed her into adulthood. When her career in banking began and she was placed in research roles, the old doubt returned. She remembers thinking she wasn't smart enough for that kind of work, so she pivoted into sales, where conversation, instinct, and human connection mattered more than dense reports. Sales felt liberating, but there was always an ache beneath it. She knew she was missing foundational tools she'd never been given, yet she didn't know why. As she later admitted, "I never had those building blocks because I didn't know I had it." The truth finally revealed itself through motherhood. Watching her oldest son change, from a confident, expressive child into one frustrated by reading, was like looking into a mirror across generations. When his younger brother began finishing stories for him, the weight of it became impossible to ignore. It took one perceptive teacher, one gentle insistence to have him evaluated, for everything to fall into place. When the diagnosis came back, dyslexia, Stephanie says the realization hit her all at once. "This is everything I have." It was a heartbreaking moment, but also a clarifying one. What once felt like personal failure was suddenly reframed as something inherited, misunderstood, and endured. In recognizing her son's struggle, Stephanie finally understood her own, not as a weakness, but as a hidden current that had shaped her resilience, her career choices, and her deep connection to people over paper. Stephanie didn't keep her struggle locked away once she finally understood it. Instead, she chose to turn it outward, toward the teenagers who were sitting in classrooms feeling the same quiet frustration she once carried. Reaching across generations, she wrote a deeply personal Instagram post aimed at young people with dyslexia who were beginning to believe school was a measure of their worth. In raw, unfiltered language, she spoke directly to that feeling of isolation and exhaustion, writing, "This message is for any dyslexic out there hating school right now. I totally get it. School sucks. Paying attention is impossible. No matter how many times you read the words on the page, they don't seem to interact with your brain. I promise school eventually ends, and when it does, calculus and physics need not be in your next chapter. And the real world cannot wait for you to unleash your OP awesomeness. Love always, Cliff notes using, cheat sheet making, detention dominating, needs to improve self-discipline on every report card, getting formally frustrated fellow dyslexic, Steph Rule. The message stunned many who thought they knew her, including fellow news anchors Savannah Guthrie and Hoda Kotb, who had no idea she'd carried this quietly for decades. Stephanie later admitted that going public had never been part of some grand plan. It wasn't about branding or vulnerability as performance. It was something far more intimate, rooted in motherhood and one unexpectedly emotional moment. She recalls being on a routine work flight, attempting to read the same book she packed for every trip. Once again, she couldn't get through it. As the plane cruised above the clouds, her thoughts drifted to her son, sitting in a classroom at that exact moment, struggling the same way she once had, frustrated, misunderstood, and feeling trapped inside his own mind. She imagined him staring at the page, growing resentful of school, maybe even of his teachers, not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much and couldn't make it work. That moment broke something open. Before the plane even landed, she shared her truth online, hoping at most it might reach a few parents or kids who needed to hear they weren't broken. What happened next overwhelmed her. As soon as she touched down, her phone exploded with messages from strangers across every background imaginable. People wrote to say, "That's me," or "That's my daughter," or "That's my brother." In that flood of recognition, Stephanie realized something quietly powerful. By finally naming her own struggle, she had permitted others to see themselves and feel less alone. Stephanie learned early how to live between two truths. To the outside world, she was the smart kid, the one who could memorize entire books, retell stories with striking detail, and impress adults with her confidence and recall. That reputation even led some to suggest she begin school ahead of schedule. But beneath that polished surface was a quieter reality. The moment school demanded true reading comprehension rather than memory, the cracks appeared. Words didn't always connect, and meaning slipped through in ways she couldn't explain. To survive, she adapted. Stephanie has openly reflected that she often had to find creative ways, what she once jokingly called cheating, to keep up. Extra credit projects became lifelines. Presentations replaced written work. These weren't shortcuts born of laziness, but strategies for filling the gaps her dyslexia left behind. Each workaround kept her afloat, even if she didn't yet understand why she needed them. That same pattern followed her into adulthood. In finance, she gravitated toward sales because numbers felt more intuitive than dense written analysis. Language-heavy roles exposed the same old insecurities, and when she eventually pursued her dream of working in news, those challenges intensified. Journalism, after all, is built on words, speed, and constant shifts in focus. She later admitted that her time on Weekend Today was the most difficult job she ever held. While others could move seamlessly through 15 stories in 10 minutes, she couldn't process information that way. The pace, the volume, and the rapid transitions pushed her to her limits. Once again, she adjusted. Behind the scenes, Stephanie built accommodations into her work, systems, preparation habits, and alternative methods that allowed her to perform at the highest level. Her co-anchors noticed these techniques long before the public ever knew the reason for them. Savannah Guthrie and Hoda Kotb have since said they were grateful Stephanie chose to speak openly about dyslexia on air, believing her honesty could help others find their own solutions. That openness is what gives her story its power. Stephanie is a woman who rose to one of the most visible positions in media, appearing composed and authoritative, even while quietly managing a condition that made every step harder. By sharing how she lives with dyslexia, not as something she overcame, but something she learned to work with, she offers more than inspiration. She offers permission. Permission to adapt, to ask for accommodations, and to believe that difficulty does not cancel out potential. For those still struggling, her life stands as a reminder. If she found her way forward, so can they. Stephanie's legacy isn't defined solely by titles, ratings, or the powerful chairs she's occupied. It's defined by the quiet courage behind the scenes, the years she spent succeeding in systems that were never designed for the way her mind worked. Living with dyslexia, she built a career in industries ruled by speed, data, and words, often having to create her own path forward when the traditional one failed her. What looked effortless to the public was, in reality, the result of resilience, adaptation, and an unshakable belief in her own worth. Her willingness to speak openly about her learning difference transformed her influence. By sharing her struggles, she gave voice to countless people who had spent their lives feeling unseen or inadequate. She reframed dyslexia not as a limitation, but as a different way of thinking, one that sharpened her empathy, strengthened her connection to people, and fueled her success in leadership and journalism. Today, Stephanie stands as more than a respected journalist and former financial executive. She is proof that brilliance doesn't always follow a straight line, and that success doesn't require perfection, only persistence. Her story reminds others living with similar challenges that their difficulties do not disqualify them from greatness. If anything, they can become the very reason their voice matters most.